North Korea is once again escalating tensions in the region, firing off 6 rounds of missiles in about a month. The regime's hostility doesn't stop there. It released a statement harshly denouncing the South Korean government while also threatening that it has no intention of sitting down with South Korean counterparts again. This while South Korea stands at a critical juncture this week with a series of major diplomatic meetings set to take place with the U.S., China, and Japan, while the fate of GSOMIA hanging by a thread. Today, we go in depth on the possible motives behind North Korea's belligerent rhetoric and what to expect ahead this week with Dr. Bong Young-shik of Yonsei University Institute for North Korean Studies. Welcome to the program.
Very pleased to be here again.
Observing from North Korea's latest missile launches, it fired off 2 projectiles each time, each from a different location, and most of them are likely to be presumed to be short-range ballistic missiles. What can we read from this?
Well, first we need to pay attention to the style of missiles test fired by North Korea. They are all short-range missiles. The range must be around 40 kilometers to up to 700 kilometers. So they are not ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, test firing of which would have been direct and clear violation of any agreement between North Korea and the United States, and which will heighten the sense of threat to the United States by North Korea. So it is very intentional that North Korea only engage in test firing of short-range missiles, only targeting South Korea and Japan. And another point that we need to pay attention is the altitude. The altitude of these test-firing missiles are around 30 to 40 kilometers in height, meaning that North Korea is attempting to develop and test a kind of missile that could penetrate the gap left by different types of missile defense system installed in South Korea, the Patriot missile system and the THAAD missile system. So while North Korea has been engaging in diplomatic negotiations with the United States and inter-Korean dialogues since the beginning of 2018 for the past year and a half, North Korea has been secretly developing new style of the short-range missiles at the same time.
So it looks like their launching of short-range ballistic missiles is a very carefully calculated move.
Right. So U.S. President Donald Trump, stated that the United States had no reason to worry about these missiles because they are not long-range missiles posing direct threat to the United States. They are short-range missiles.
Now, North Korea's verbal attack on the South Korean government was especially harsh this year, calling President Moon Jae-in a laughable hypocrite, while also lashing out at lawmaker Park Ji-won, which is quite rare because Mr. Park is well known for his role in materializing the first ever inter-Korean summit that took place in 2000. Why is North Korea upping its denouncement of South Korea?
Well, there are several reasons that we can guess. One possible reason is to make sure that South Korea will be given any room in upcoming negotiations between North Korea and the United States on denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula. So it is an attempt to break the hope of the Moon Jae-in government of South Korea to be a mediator or stakeholder in the upcoming negotiations on the Korean Peninsula. So it is a clear expression of its desire to only directly negotiate with the Trump administration, which is a kind of anomaly compared to previous U.S. administrations. Previous U.S. governments have been really in good coordination with the South Korean government in dealing with North Korea. So it's basically a classical example of divide and conquer, or separate your adversaries.
South Korean politicians are, as always, divided on how our nation should deal with North Korea's growing belligerence. How do you think we should react, or what do you think is the preferred approach?
Well, I mean, you can just throw your arms in the air, and we cannot expect anything positive about our politicians, but I don't think South Korea is the only case in that regard. I think diverse and contentious opinions are not all bad, because that's a clear reflection of very different and diverse opinions and perspectives existing in South Korean society as a democratic society. So this can be a good asset for the leadership to build effective strategy. Not only rational from the strategic standpoint, but also very acceptable in accordance with mainstream public opinion. But of course, there's a sense of urgency in crisis. If South Korean government fails to come up with very responsive and effective policies in reactions to North Korea's provocations, including the 6 rounds of missile tests. But the prize that Moon Jae-in government of South Korea is still keeping its eyes on is the upcoming working level meetings between Washington and Pyongyang, and potential 4th summit meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Chairman Kim Jong-un of South Korea. That accounts for the rather muted response rendered by the Moon Jae-in government so far in the aftermath of North Korea's numerous test firing of missiles.
North Korea has cited the annual South Korea-U.S. joint drills as the main reason behind its discontent. As we all know, the joint drills will be over by tomorrow. Then do you think North Korea will halt its provocative acts?
It depends on how you define provocative acts by North Korea. There can be different kinds of provocations made possible by North Korea. One is the provocations mainly toward South Korea. And another type of provocation is provocations that threaten the United States. I don't think North Korea is going to do anything that will pose direct threat to the United States, because the main prize for North Korea is to get something from the Trump administration, mainly sanction reliefs. Sanction reliefs are only made possible by the decision by the United States. So I don't think North Korean leadership is going to do anything stupid. They will exacerbate the atmosphere inside Washington that goes against any productive engagement between North Korea and the United States. But at the same time, we cannot rule out that North Korea is continue to dismiss, even offend Seoul and Tokyo, to express their opposition and dissatisfaction about the current status.
North Korea and China, meanwhile, reaffirmed their traditional friendship over the weekend. The director of the General Political Bureau of the Korean People's Army, Kim Soo-gil, held talks with the vice chairman of China's Central Military Commission, Zhang Youxia, in Beijing. The talks came on the heels of North Korea's latest series of missile launches and amid the halted Pyongyang-Washington nuclear talks. How do you see this?
Well, it's something that we anticipated to come after Xi Jinping's visit to North Korea a few months ago. It was the first ever state visit by the top leadership of China. But after the summit meeting held in Pyongyang, there has not been a lot of full development or progress on the front of Sino-North Korean relations. So this is kind of a belated first step to materialize any kind of big agreements forged between the two leaders at the summit meeting. In addition to that, it is kind of a preemptive action taken by Beijing and Pyongyang to take full advantage of observed weakness of the trilateral security coordination and cooperation among U.S., Japan, and South Korea. After Abe administration's decision to levy export control on South Korea, and South Korea threatening to walk away from GSOMIA, then the state of the trilateral security cooperation among U.S., Japan, and South Korea has been greatly diminished. I think both countries, China and North Korea, seem to want to have a maximum benefit from the lack of high level of security cooperation among these three countries.
Now, a busy and very critical week for South Korea. This week we have a line of major diplomatic events lined up. And first up, U.S. Special Representative on North Korean Affairs Stephen Biegun is due in Seoul tomorrow to hold talks after wrapping up his trip to Japan. Do you think some kind of details will be unveiled on the much anticipated working level nuclear talks between Pyongyang and Washington? I think so.
It's about time. It's about time for North Korea and the United States, doing something to initiate the working level meetings, because it is what North Korean leadership promised, that after the joint military exercises would be over, then there will be more proactive actions taken by Pyongyang in favor of the resumption of the working level meetings. So we have some reasons to take the words given by North Korean leadership seriously, at least at the face value. So I guess Stephen Biegun's visit to Japan and South Korea is exactly for that purpose, as a preparation for the expected working level meetings. At the same time, United States is carrying out its America First policy toward its Asian allies. So there will be very tough negotiations between United States and South Korea and Japan regarding the defense cost sharing agreement and potential deployment of its own forces to protect the commercial vessels in the Middle East. So there will be a lot of very tumultuous negotiations on very tough issues.
A lot of things we should look out for this week. And also a Seoul, Beijing, Tokyo trilateral foreign ministers meeting will be held in Beijing. And Japan has today made it official that a bilateral Seoul-Tokyo foreign ministers meeting will take place on Wednesday. What kind of outcome do you expect from these developments?
Well, at this point, it's very difficult to ascertain what kind of outcomes would be made out of a series of bilateral meetings between foreign ministers or trilateral meetings. One guess is that in the trilateral meetings among foreign ministers of China, Japan, and South Korea, probably the key issue is how to ensure the safety of the allegedly polluted water, radiated water in Fukushima. And China and South Korea may demand full and reliable explanations by the government of Japan about the safety. But in bilateral meetings, then the critical issue, of course, between South Korea and Japan is how to, patch up its bilateral relationship amid, tension because of the, dispute over the individual rights to claim in favor of the South Korean victims toward the Japanese corporations and the export control measures taken by the Abe administration of Japan. So we have to pay attention to a series of bilateral meetings and trilateral meetings at the same time.
Now, the fate of GSOMIA, or Seoul-Tokyo Military Intelligence Sharing Pact, will also be decided by this week. We don't know yet whether the pact will be extended for another year or not, but could you quickly, we only have about less than a minute left, the implications of both scenarios?
Well, if South Korea refuses to renew the GSOMIA with Japan and the United States, then in principle, South Korean government can justify its decision saying that, listen, it was Abe administration Japan which had made the first blow, declined to keep South Korea as its security partner. So it's a quid pro quo, eye for eye. If Japan doesn't regard South Korea as a security partner, then South Korea cannot regard Japan as a security partner and stay with the GSOMIA with the United States and Japan. That's one argument. The other argument is that, well, South Korean government's criticism to Abe administration is that this export control only undermines the security cooperation among United States, Japan, and South Korea. But if South Korea walks away from GSOMIA this year, then South Korea will be held by the same criticism that not only Japan but South Korea engage in the same type of behavior that actually undermines the trilateral security cooperation. So two wrongs do not make one right, at least in the eyes of Washington. So in the aftermath of the alleged decline of the U.S. government to accept special advisor of national security to the Moon Jae-in government as the next Korean ambassador to Washington, then if South Korea walks away from GSOMIA, then the state of the bilateral security cooperation between Seoul and Washington will even further go down. So South Korean government has to be really careful about this decision.
Well, indeed, a very delicate situation South Korea
Definitely
is facing. Thank you so much, Dr. Bong, for your insights tonight.
You're welcome.
And that does it for this edition of News in Depth. From all of us here at Arirang, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you right back here, same time tomorrow.